here to talk to us about some of the new legislation coming up, and they want to listen to us too. So we'll get a chance to talk, and they'll get a chance to talk. And so I just want to turn it over to Liz and let her talk.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for feeding us. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for working today. I'm Liz Chapman with Recycle Colorado. Recycle Colorado is a statewide nonprofit, and what we specialize in is trying to advance recycling and circular economy across all communities in Colorado. So we do a lot of work on the Front Range, of course, because that's where people are, that's where a lot of waste is, but we also do work in communities like La Junta, out in Grand Junction, up north towards Sterling. We try and touch all of the state. So thank you for making time to let me share some of what we're working on here. And the big thing that is coming down in Colorado is this big thing called producer responsibility. Has anybody heard producer responsibility? We got a few hands. So in a lot of places, producer responsibility is often called extended producer responsibility. And in broad strokes, what that is trying to do is make producers responsible for packaging. So we have a Doritos package on the table. That's a Frito-Lay company. They should be responsible for what happens to that package when we're done with it. Great Value is another brand that producer should be responsible for what happens to that water bottle when we're done using it. That's the concept behind producer responsibility. Here in Colorado, we passed our producer responsibility bill in 2022. It was House Bill 22-1355, and how it's designed to work in Colorado is the brand owners are considered the producers. So that has a Sonic brand on it, that Sonic would be considered the producer. The Frito-Lay would be the producer of the chips. Great Value, I'm trying to think. This is Medical Pride would be the producer here. So the producers are, in our law, considered to be the brand owners, and that's who's going to pay the fee. They're going to pay fees for each one of these packages. So each one of those chip packages, or the water bottle, or the cups, there will be a tiny fee assessed for each one of those materials. Previous studies have shown that fee will be hundredths of a cent. So it's not something that is expected to increase consumer prices based on how it's worked in Europe and in Canada. And it's been present in Europe for over 20 years. They've been doing it in Canada for over 10 years. So we have a lot of data to base the fact that the assumption that it's not going to increase consumer prices is based on some accurate research over many years, over several decades. They'll pay those fees into a fund, and then a nonprofit organization will disperse the money collected to pay for residential recycling everywhere in Colorado. And that will look different in different places. Some places it will be a reimbursement that the municipality or the county pays to have services provided. In some places it will be standing up new programs that don't currently exist. And in places like La Junta, it'll be reimbursing for operations such as Clean Valley Recycling so that they have an outside source of money to cover all of the costs of running the place. So the way it works in Colorado is we've got what's called a producer responsibility organization. And the producer responsibility organization is often referred to as a PRO. A lot of people will call it the PRO. That's the Producer Responsibility Organization. It's a nonprofit that is charged with running this whole program. So this is not going to be a program run by the state. It's going to be run by a nonprofit that is a membership organization of all of the producers. So when I named Great Value, which is a Walmart brand, and Frito-Lay, and Coca-Cola, and Dr. Pepper, those are all the companies that are going to join the Producer Responsibility Organization. The organization that's been selected to serve in Colorado is called Circular Action Alliance, abbreviated CAA. Circular Action Alliance is serving as the producer responsibility organization here in Colorado. They've also been chosen to serve as the producer responsibility organization in Maryland, who is also looking at a producer responsibility program. They are applying to be the organization recognized by the state of California and in Oregon. California and Oregon have not made the choice yet, so we don't know how many different states our producer responsibility organization is also going to be. But as you can imagine, if you are an organization like Walmart, Coca-Cola, and you are selling stuff in every state across the nation, you would like to have a singular producer responsibility organization to manage your fees and to communicate with, rather than 50 different organizations in 50 different states. So I anticipate we're going to see the CAA, the Circular Action Alliance, chosen in more states than they're not chosen, since they were early adopters of this program. But we don't know for sure what will happen yet. There's oversight done by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So I said the state's not going to run the program. The state's not going to run the program, but they are going to regulate the program. So the law states that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, most of us call them CDPHE, they are in charge of making sure that the producer responsibility organization is abiding by the law. So they have the ability to find the organization and regulate them and make sure that they're doing what's written out in the law. And then there's a third group of people involved, and that's called the Producer Responsibility Advisory Board. I serve on that advisory board, and our task is we are supposed to be advising both the state and the producer responsibility organization about how to do this in a way that benefits Colorado and that is practical in Colorado. So the advisory board is made up of people like myself that specialize in connecting recycling organizations across the state, landfill operators, people that specialize in hauling materials, people that specialize in composting, people that make product packaging, and people that represent trade associations. Like we've got the Glass Packaging Institute on our board, as well as other organizations that have been involved with producer responsibility programs in other countries like Canada. So the advisory board says to both the state and the producer responsibility organization, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, this is how you should do this is what should do that, and then CDPHE gets the final say. And what's happening right now, where we are in the process right now, is the producer responsibility organization just finished what is called a needs assessment. And I'm assuming that Dee had a lot to do with the needs assessment. Do you want to share some of the questions you answered as part of that?
Yeah, I filled out a survey as part of it, and I don't know if the municipalities did also. I haven't talked with them on that, but some of the questions were just tonnage, how many tons of the different materials that we divert from the landfill, and it's been a while, I can't remember.
Yeah, they asked what kind of
material.
materials do you process, how much do you process, what do you charge, where do you sell it, what are your end markets?
Oh yeah, they wanted to know where all our materials go.
And then what is the process for getting materials from people's homes to bales and to facility? So they want to know, I'm sure.
Curbside or drop off places.
And you ask for what we would call source separated. So at Clean Valley Recycling, rather than putting paper and plastic and metal and glass all into one container, as you all know, especially those of you who've been sorting it, there's an orange bag for the paper products, and then there's a green bag for the other mixed recycling. In some places, you put all of that material into one container, and then it gets sorted out at a place similar to Clean Valley Recycling, but bigger and with a lot more automation, a lot of robots and lasers and some really cool technology. So those are the kind of questions that the Producer Responsibility Organization has been asking to find out. What is the state of recycling across Colorado? What does it cost? Who participates? How much material is there? They are in the process of taking answers to surveys like you filled out and evaluating, well, if we want everyone in Colorado to recycle, what is that going to cost? What is that going to require? what kind of facilities need to be built, which is a word we would use, a word I would use to describe that is infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, that can mean anything to what kind of trucks are needed, what kind of buildings are needed, what kind of transportation routes need to be established, what kind of drop-off centers need to be built in order to say everybody in Colorado has the capacity to recycle the way you guys can recycle here. Once they figure that out, which we expect them to have done at the end of this month, they are then going to take that information and say to CDPHE, the state, and to the advisory board, well, if we want to reduce by X amount, let's say 20%, say we want to increase recycling by 20% by the year 2030, this is what it would cost. Say we want to increase recycling 50% by 2030, well, this is what that would cost. Does that make sense to everybody? So those are things called scenarios. They're going to present a number of scenarios to the state and the advisory board, and the advisory board and the state are going to evaluate that and go, this one we think is the most feasible, the most beneficial, the best timeline. And then the state takes that recommendation up to the Joint Budget Commission at the state legislature, and they say, yep, we agree, this is a great plan, go for it. Or they say, we kind of like it, but change these things and then go for it. Or they say, don't do it. And then we have to start over from scratch. So we're hoping very much that that is not how this is going to go, which brings me to, why does it matter to you? Why am I here? What can you do? Well, part of what you can do is just keep recycling. Another part of what you can do is stay tuned, because in February, we will be at the end of that path I just laid out, and we will know this is the scenario, and we will know what the Joint Budget Commission is going to be asked, and we will need everybody that wants recycling to succeed in Colorado to write to their state legislatures and testify perhaps before the Joint Budget Commission, if they give us that chance, to say yes, so that we make this real. Because if we make it real, it's going to radically transform recycling here in Colorado. It means that places like Clean Valley Recycling will no longer be in a position of having to constantly beg for every dime. It means that they will have financial solvency and be able to provide recycling at no cost to everyone who lives in it. Yay! So, questions?
For that producer responsibility money to come in before they start this, to get that?
Such a
or
good
are we
question,
looking,
yes.
is the state gonna fund that ahead of time and take that back?
Great question, and that is certainly one of the paths, but that's not the path that was chosen by this legislation. So the timeline is where we are right now, where we're taking all this information and we're coming up with a plan. That will be done by the end of January. We'll have some sort of plan. Then the JDC approves it. Once the JDC says, yes, it's a good plan, keep going, then they're gonna start collecting money. They're gonna come up with a plan to say when we're gonna start collecting money, how much money are we gonna collect. So I said that containers like the water bottle or the chip packet will be hundredths of a cent, but is that 1/100th of a cent? Is it 1/1000th of a cent? Right, they still have to determine exactly how much they're gonna charge for each of these packages, and that's something they will use 2024 to determine. And by the end of 2024, beginning in 2025, they will start collecting monies. And they will collect monies throughout 2025, and by 2026, they will have money to hand out and reimburse people. So we won't see any of the money going out from the PRO until 2026, because they're not gonna be able to start collecting it until probably 2025. If they can get ahead of that, they'd like to. So I mentioned that the producer responsibility organization that's been chosen is the Circular Action Alliance. Well, those companies, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Unilever, they have put in money already. They have already spent millions of dollars to create this nonprofit PRO. So they want this to succeed, and they are putting their money where their mouth is. But they don't have enough money to pay for the whole system until they collect from all the brand owners those tiny amounts. to get to the multiple millions of dollars it's gonna take to stand up this, a system in Colorado. Does that make sense? Any other questions?
In terms of rural Colorado,
Yeah.
things are going to cost more because of distance. So how is that going to be factored in?
So the question is, things are gonna cost more in rural Colorado than they are in urban Colorado because of distance and there's less economy of scale, right? So you know that if you go to the store and you buy 100 of something, each one of those things costs less than if you go to the store and buy 10, right? You go to the store and buy 10, each item costs a little more. So the same thing is true in reverse. When you're in rural Colorado and you've got a small pile of recycling to sell, it's costs more per item than it would in urban Colorado where you've got a density of population and a density of waste. So the costs will be different in different parts of the state. We also factor in the mountains, right? There are areas of the mountains in Colorado that are not particularly rural per se, they're fairly dense, but they're in the middle of the mountains. So they have those same challenges that the rural communities do. The Producer Responsibility Organization is taking all of that into account to figure out how much needs to be spent. And you're right that in rural Colorado, the amount of money spent to recycle an individual bottle will be a little bit higher than the amount of money spent to recycle an individual bottle on the Front Range. However, everybody's going to get reimbursed to recycle that bottle. So there's not going to be a difference in fees and there's not going to be a difference in reimbursement. If it costs you more per bottle in this area than it costs you more per bottle, you still get reimbursed to the same degree that people in the Front Range get reimbursed. And that's part of what makes figuring out how much do we charge for each package tricky. Because they're going to collect the same amount all the way across the state, even though the reimbursement piece is going to be a little bit different in different areas. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
So this House bill's already on the books, and this crop of businesses and companies is already established. Is there federal money out there that?
Such a good question. So the question is there federal money to help support this program? Yes and no. So there, in the no camp, there's no federal money to support this program specifically. But in the yes camp, the federal government has a number of programs funded through the BIL, the
Inflation Reduction Act.
Thank you. There is money in that pot of grants that is specifically aimed at reducing waste, increasing the life of the landfill, reducing emissions from the landfill. And so it's not exactly related to this program, but it's complementary, if that makes sense. So we've got one example of that is a grant was awarded to Chaffee County, and they are going to build a MRF in Chaffee County with those funds. So that MRF, a materials recovery facility, which is what we're standing in right now. This is a MRF, a materials recovery facility. They don't have one in Chaffee County, and the federal money is going to allow them to build one in advance, so they don't have to wait till the 2026 money to roll out from this program. They will already have that process underway. So it's complementary, but it's not directly supporting this program. Does that make sense?
Well,
Other questions?
read those requirements. In other words, are we gonna have to factor in that there would be electric trucks and green energy? You say?
There is nothing in the producer responsibility program that specifically outlines power source or powering vehicles through any particular way. There are other pieces of legislation that address saving energy,
I mean,
reducing
being
carbon.
factored in. In other words, if we go green and it gets cheaper, we actually increase.
Oh, okay. So the way the program is designed is they're going to reimburse what your costs are. So if your costs go less, you will likely be reimbursed at a lesser amount.
Fair enough. It is a nonprofit.
Pardon?
It is a nonprofit.
It is a nonprofit. It is. However, the state is going to continue having funding, like the Resource Recovery and Economic Opportunity grants that I know Clean Valley has benefited from before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've benefited a lot from the
And
Barbary Hill.
those grants are going to stay in place, and that program will still be available to fill in some of the gaps that aren't covered by this grant. Put millions of dollars into this. Well, they've made a interior pledge within their company. They've said, we want these bottles to have a higher percentage of recycled plastic. But they can't get those bottles to have a higher percentage of recycled plastic because in Colorado, we throw away 84% of them. We don't put them in the recycle bin.
Sorry about the noise.
Yeah.
You can yell.
Can you yell?
Yeah. So the companies
Yeah,
have
go in
made
the
it.
sunlight. We could go in the sunshine even. I'm sorry.
The companies have, that's right, they're working. The companies have made a commitment to make sure that their products have recycled content. And in Colorado, we only recycle 16% of the products we take off the shelf. Only 16% of those things that we buy make it into the recycle bin. Well, that's not enough to make these bottles out of recycled plastic. So this is part of their effort to get more of those bottles back into the recycling bin so they can turn them into new products that they can sell to us, and then we recycle them, they turn them into new products, they sell them to us, we recycle them, and it becomes a circular system.
It's gonna make like things that are not recyclable. We've been talking a lot about Frito-Lay. Those aren't recyclable.
Correct.
Will this bill allow them to like make a new product packaging that's more recyclable?
Well, so the question is, will this bill do anything about making packaging more recyclable? Its intention is yes. That is how it is intended to function. What I would add to your question is, you said right now that chip bag is not recyclable. There is nobody stopping them from making that recyclable. They are allowed to make that recyclable right here, right now, right? For lots of reasons, they have decided that it's not worth it for them. So this program is going to charge a small, if we go in these circles, you can think of like concentric circles getting bigger. In the very middle are the things that are highly recyclable. Things like glass, things like #1 plastic, aluminum cans, steel cans. Those will have the lowest fee. And then you go out a little bit and you get into maybe plastic film or some of those jugs that you guys are recycling, and they're recyclable, but they're not as good, so they'll have a little bit higher fee. And then you come out to something like the chip bag, which is not recyclable, it will have the highest fee.
Yay.
So if they start making that out of one of those things that is closer to the readily recyclable, they'll pay a lower fee. And so that is how this bill is intending to motivate companies to make products that are highly recyclable. So the question is there anything in the bill language to protect consumers from having producers raise prices to pay for this program? No, there is not. However, as I said, decades of research in other places has shown that the fees are so small per item, there is not a discernible increase in. What we have seen is the increase from the producer responsibility program is dramatically less than fuel price increases, rent price increases, electricity price increases. Those are things that actually raise the price of products more than a producer responsibility fee, because it's anywhere from 1/10 of a cent to 1/1000th of a cent per item. But there is nothing in the law that expressly says they're not allowed to raise prices. So it's, that is a concern. But the question is, does this address aluminum recycling? Yes, it addresses all materials. So everything that is a package material will have a fee, and the fee will be higher the less recyclable it is. The more recyclable it is, the lower the fee, but there is still a fee. And aluminum will definitely be in that small circle because aluminum is highly recyclable. Costs, so that all of the households that participate in your program pay nothing and your costs are covered. So I don't know yet what their reimbursement strategy is going to be. That's part of what we'll be figuring out in 2024. is the details of how this is gonna play out. And they might do it by pound of tonnage of material. They might do it by household, don't know. Colorado as a state is very averse to punishing people for personal choice, right? That is not something that we frequently want to legislate. So in Colorado, it is only an incentive. The incentive is there's no cost. And then the producer responsibility organization, one of the things they have to spend money on, in addition to reimbursing facilities for processing materials, in addition to building infrastructure, they also have to launch a statewide education campaign so that everybody who lives here understands what's happening. So hopefully, the fact that it doesn't cost anything, one of the things we find again and again as we go across the state, we talk to people about, why don't you recycle? The number one reason we hear is, I cannot afford it. So we're hopeful that this takes away that top reason. And then the second reason is, I don't understand how, and hopefully this educational program will help address that question. Yes?
Is the educational program for the community, or is it also going to be implemented in schools?
It will likely be implemented in the community with the option for schools to use the same materials. So because the program isn't paying for school recycling, it won't be a mandated thing that the schools have to share that information, but the information will be there. So teachers like Rebecca that are interested in this will be able to take those materials for no charge and share them with her students. And any school that wants to share it will be able to, they just won't be required to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just know that the school does use Clean Valley
Yes.
recycling in this area.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids are asking, like, why do we have to put stuff in those bags? So it would be, it is something that a lot of kids are curious about. Education.
And that's something that will likely fall in the reimbursement category. So Clean Valley will likely be able to say to the producer responsibility organization, we spent X thousand dollars educating in schools, and that's part of our cost to residents, and they should be reimbursed for that. No, not with this program. There are things, back to the question about the federal funding, there are federal funds that are working on more electronics and battery recycling, and Recycle Colorado is applying for some of those funds, but it's not related to this program. But there is money being spent to try and improve that.
Yeah, because of businesses like Apple now having a new phone every year and all sorts of electronic waste.
Governments are gonna have this program.
So the local government role will vary from place to place. Does Clean Valley get any money from local government?
No, but we partner with them on our curbside program.
Okay.
So like in Rocky Ford, Dwayne's a city council person in Rocky Ford, and Damon's city council in the Hunt, and Nick too. And so we partner with them, they allow the recycling fee to be on the utility bill.
Okay.
So that's the way we partner.
And then they pay you. They pass through that money to you.
Yes.
So that might be a situation where Rocky Ford may then get reimbursed instead of paying the money to her. It might be that the PRO pays you to pay her. You know, that will vary from place to place. Some place like so Denver has their own waste and recycling system, so they will be paid directly to compensate for those costs. Other places like Arvada, they have a contract with a private hauler, so the city pays the private hauler, and now the situation will be the producer responsibility organization will pay the city the costs that they pay to the hauler to provide recycling to their residents. So it depends on how much money is the city or the county spending on recycling, they will get that money back. But they don't have to. So we've got a number of communities that they don't do anything. It's all private industry. And so they won't be engaged in this system.
Okay.